All right, ladies and gentlemen, we have 8 o'clock, and since we are starting session a bit early this morning, I'm going to do my best to move us along. I'll call this meeting of the Education Committee to order. And Dwayne, what numbers? There we go. I'm going to ask Chairman Dwayne Hill to open us in prayer.
Our dear kind Heavenly Fathers, we come to you with humble hearts. Thank you, Lord, for another beautiful day that you've given us. Lord, we thank you for the honor of being able to represent our constituents. We pray and ask from you that you'd give us the wisdom and the knowledge and the understanding that we stand in need of, and that everything that we do would be pleasing to you. We ask your leadership and your guidance in this meeting, and may whatever we do would be something that would honor you, and we ask this in Jesus' name. Amen.
Thank you, sir. Okay, with that, Chairman Belton, if you want to present there, if you'll press your button. So, ladies and gentlemen of the committee, we are looking at Chairman Belton's bill, House Bill 32. And Mr. Chairman, if we can just confirm, we're working on LC 490286.
That's correct, sir.
And we have folks on Zoom. So to our friends and committee members who are on Zoom, if you would, as always, just if you have a question, please hit us in the chat box, and Ms. Courtney will take care of that. Chairman Belton, the floor is yours. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to the committee. This bill should look very, very familiar to you because it's the exact same bill as House Bill 736 last year, which the overall body passed almost unanimously. I think there's 2 no votes. This, very briefly, I'd like to share a sentence by the folks who actually did this pamphlet here, the Georgia Partnership of Excellence in Education. Is that a statement I think is very true. Georgia will not continue to be the top state for the nation for doing business without more students entering and competing in education in a meaningful way. So what this is a tax credit. I put a piece of paper on your desk, and I'll just kind of go through the middle of it because I know it's already been through subcommittee. But it's a loan. It's a tax credit that applies to the lowest performing schools and the most rural schools. That's a universe of about 325 schools. The Department of Education will annually select 100 of the most needy schools. The local Board of Education shall select the teachers that they need the most. GOSA will monitor the progress of the program, and the Department of Revenue will pay the teacher $3,000 a year for 5 years max, for a total maximum of $15,000 per participating teacher. It requires a 5-year commitment. This first come, first serve, and because it's only 1,000 teachers are going to be able to participate initially, the maximum it can cost is the $3 million a year. 46 states have some sort of loan forgiveness program or a tax credit program like this. In 70% of those states, it helped the teachers go to these needy schools. It especially helps minority schools and, of course, very rural schools. I've looked at 43 different studies. In these 43 different studies, about 90% of the time, the teachers do stay in that school for 5 years. And believe it or not, last year there's over 3,112 positions that went unfilled completely because they could not find people to go into these schools. So I will entertain questions. I could go through the different states about what kind of programs they have, if you'd like, Mr. Chairman. But I think I'll entertain questions at this time.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And to members of the committee, let me point out a couple of things. So as Chairman Belton said, this is a capped program. So a question that came out of subcommittee is there a fiscal note? Well, of course, the answer is no, because this is $3,000 a year maximum, 1,000 teacher maximum. Therefore, the maximum cost would be $3 million. Another point that I want to make on line, this came out of subcommittee on line 37, the key word here, this is the lowest 5%, lowest performing 5% of schools or rural. So this is not the lowest 5% of rural. This is the lowest 5%, or. The other thing that I just want to point out very quickly, this came out of Chairman Jones' subcommittee with the unanimous vote do pass. Again, this bill passed in this form last year on the House floor, if I'm not mistaken, Chairman Belton, 164-1. So we have seen this, we have discussed this, there is support. We do have two questions. Representative Benton, is that you on 14? Go ahead.
Representative Belton, had a couple of questions. First of all, do you have any idea how many different programs we've initiated in the last 15 years to try to address this problem?
No, sir, I don't.
Well, seems like we're addressing this problem about every other year, every third year since I've been here. And it does, I understand what you're trying to do. Tax credit, they get the credit, but they still might have a tax bill that they have to pay. Was anything done to look at helping pay student debt like we have done for doctors and vets that have gone into specific fields and so forth instead of a tax credit? Because teachers, for the most part, people that are in education are going to go where they want to go. And it doesn't matter whether you're going to give them $3,000 or not. If they don't want to go to a rural area, they're not going to go. But if you make it, we're going to help you pay off your debt, student loan or whatever. They see that. I think they would see that in a better light. So that was just my thoughts on it. Thank you.
Yes, sir. Thank you for the question. This bill went through 12 different drafts. It did not go through this committee last year. It went through the Higher Education Committee as a bipartisan group that I worked with. And what the conclusion was at the time by the leadership was that this was more palatable than trying to do a loan forgiveness program for whatever reason.
We have two questions online. Representative Maynor.
Thank you, Chairman. I just want to go on the record saying I'm in support of the bill. A lot of times when people think rural, I'm glad that he put the bottom or lowest 5% performing schools, because those are schools that are in my district. So a lot of things that are happening in rural communities are also happening in urban communities, just as this data says. My question would be, since there is a cap, what are the logistics behind the start of application to when you find out you're able to get this credit? And why this question is important is, if you're in a rural area or even in a poor performing area, your ability to fill out a complicated form may be difficult. And I just want to make sure that it's an even playing field between urban and rural.
Well, thank you for your question, Representative. I do appreciate your vote of confidence. On line 66, it starts talking about, there's actually a lot of moving parts in this bill, and one of the reasons why it took so long to draft is because we had to make sure everything was correct. But basically, the department, which is the Department of Education, line 66, will determine which public schools get this. We'll publish a list of which schools will get these participating slots, and via that, the local school board will know, okay, I have so many slots per this school, and then that school principal will then say, well, I have this slot, and who wants to get this job? And so the teacher could apply to that school and say, well, I know they have that slot there. And then once that teacher gets a slot and it is hired by that school, knowing she has that slot or he has that slot, then the local school board will inform the Department of Revenue that that person has that slot and should get that tax credit.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Also online, Representative Carter, you have a question?
Yes, good morning. Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Representative Belton. I appreciate all the work that you do, and I know you're a passionate advocate for education and supporting our children. So I have a couple questions rolled into one. I love what you're doing. The question is, once all of the slots have been made available, and if they are not filled, is there an opportunity, and this may need an amendment, but would there be an opportunity for a school outside of the original spec of the lowest 5% or rural to have the opportunity for a teacher in a school district that has the need, but maybe not following those two categories? Could that be an opportunity once all the slots are open and if there are additional slots available? And the biggest caveat for me would be, will these teachers, is there a way for us to also find a way for the teachers to be moved up on the list of the COVID vaccine? We know it's important. We want to get kids back to school. We want everybody safe, but those are the two things that for me would be my questions for this bill. And I do support it.
And Chairman Belton, if I may, Representative Carter, thank you for the question. I'll let Chairman Belton answer the first part, but I'm not sure that the second part of your question applies specifically to this bill. And I think, as the governor has stated recently, we are in a bit of a state of affairs, if you will, where we have a certain amount of vaccine available, and we are doing our best to prioritize those who fall under those initial groups that can receive the vaccine. But Chairman Belton, if you'll address the first part of that as far as expansion goes.
Thank you for the question, Representative Carter. Appreciate your support. Again, this is a pretty narrowly focused, laser focused, I like to say, approach at trying to help these specific schools. I'm sure the Department of Education will be able to allot 1,000 teachers pretty quickly. And again, I'd love to have 10,000 teachers. I'd love to have 100,000 teachers get this program. But if we expand that program, that it will come to a fiscal cost where it's just prohibitive. So this is a pilot program. I hope later on we can expand it because it's so successful.
Thank you.
May I follow up, Chairman?
Go ahead.
So I'm not saying expand it. I'm saying you have 1,000 slots. I'm saying if you end up and only 900 of them are able to be filled, then we have 100 slots that aren't filled. I'm not saying expand it because I do understand that this is a pilot, but I just wanted to know if there was an opportunity, if we can't fill the 1,000 in that segment, could there be an opportunity to expand the scope, not the number of teachers? But I understand, I do understand what you're saying. And Chairman, I do understand about the vaccine, but I think we got to do everything we can to fight for the teachers.
I certainly appreciate your passion for our teachers. I share that passion. Again, as Chairman Belton said, this has been through 12 drafts, as well as a committee and a House vote. So I think at this time, the program as it's presented is the one that we'll be discussing and moving forward with. Representative number 14, Representative Benton.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Representative Belton, one other question. This is for full-time teachers, but what about those teachers that have retired and would like to come back and maybe don't want to work a full day, want to work a half a day, 49%? Is there anything, I didn't see anything in the bill that might address that?
Sir, that there isn't. I do have a separate bill about retiring teachers that the Chairman Blackman is carrying, but that's not in this bill, sir.
All right, thank you.
I believe one more question, Representative Evans.
Yes, good morning. Thank you, Chairman, and thank you, Representative Belton, for bringing this bill. I mean, I just wanted to confirm, so this is just for new teachers. Is this for new teachers, or is this for teachers that are already at these schools?
This is for teachers who are willing to move to one of these participating schools. So it could be a new teacher or a experienced teacher, as long as they went to that school knowing that they would have that slot at that school.
And then I guess I do think this is a good bill, but I wonder a little bit just about, like, within that teacher population at that school, you know,
And that's a good
bulletin owned-
question. And it's
bulletin
a
owned, and he
philosophical.
gets that extra 3,000 and the rest of them are just toiling away at the lower salary, or how will that be handled, do you think?
Yes, ma'am. It's a philosophical question. In my opinion, something's better than nothing. And if this is a successful program that will give more money to all the rural, very rural and lowest performing schools, and a bonus or something. But what I'm saying here is, if this is a program to laser focus to try to address this need, GOSA is going to monitor the progress. If GOSA finds out, wow, this is really working, then they'll expand it. If it's not working, then we'll shelf it and get rid of it. But that would be my answer, Representative.
Thank you.
At this time, I'm going to recognize Representative Wilson for a question, and I believe this should be our last question. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Representative, my question is, I'm just trying to understand, where do the funds come from? Where do the funds come from?
From the Department of Revenue. I mean, lines 154, it talks about it's going to be a tax credit.
I got you.
Yeah.
I just want to make it clear that we're not placing a mandate of any kind onto the local school district. Okay, thank you.
Seeing no more questions, again, this bill came through Chairman Jones' subcommittee with a unanimous vote. So at this time, I'll entertain a motion.
Chairman, I'd like to do pass. Motion do pass.
We have a motion to pass. We have a second by Representative Wilson. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
We have a couple online. Thank you. All opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Thank you, Chairman Belton. Okay, moving along. We will now turn our attention to House Bill 287 by Chairman Rich. Oh, there you are. And for the committee members, just to confirm, Chairman Rich, we are working on LC 490368. And if you could tell me your microphone number or press the button.
Where's the button on here?
All right, there we go.
Okay.
You should be live.
Okay.
And again, for the committee, just for confirmation, this came out of Chairman Wade's subcommittee as well, with a unanimous vote of support. And so, Chairman Rich, the floor is yours if you want to present from there.
All right, thank you. I come to you this morning with a continuation of my attempt from last session to address the problems that we have with youth vaping. And this is simply an update to the existing code that provides for drug and alcohol instruction in our K through 12 schools. This is just to add education on the use of tobacco and vapor products, in keeping with the trends and the methods by which children are ingesting nicotine and other substances as well. This is especially timely right now because with the COVID-19 epidemic, which, as we all know, is primarily respiratory, we are seeing that children who vape are exponentially affected by the virus. They are much more likely to have serious symptoms and also much more likely to be hospitalized. Fortunately, this will, if passed, will go into effect so that next school year, our children will begin to be educated on the dangers and repercussions from vaping and tobacco. So I would just ask, of course, for favorable consideration.
Well, thank you, Chairman Rich. And I just want to point out a couple of things. And for our friends who are on Zoom and for those who are watching, members should have in front of you letters of support for this bill from the American Academy of Pediatrics, as well as the Georgia Academy of Family Physicians. And I just want to give pause and make two comments here. One, as Chairman Rich said, it's worrisome to me that vaping products have, I can't come up with a better word, infiltrated our young folks. But I am very concerned that we're not talking about a 5% or 10% increase in the COVID virus, COVID infection in these young folks. But as Chairman Rich said, I believe it's 5 times. And so I commend you for your work on this bill, and I certainly stand in full support of it. We do have 2 questions. Representative Benton, I think you're number 14.
Yes, sir. Thank you. Representative Rich, the only problem I have with the bill is it's something else for teachers to have to do. It's just another thing that's been added to the plate of education.
Well, actually, there is a curriculum already in place, and they're already teaching about drug and alcohol. And the state will work with the local school boards to just insert the vapor and tobacco curriculum. So it's not adding another segment. It's just adding another topic or issue, if you will, into the existing curriculum.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you. Representative Irwin.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First of all, very supportive of this bill, Chairman Rich. Very good bill. I believe we can solve most problems with good education. Reading down through this, it came to my attention here, and I see we have Superintendent Woods in the room. I see we're striking through the curriculum at that time, the code section 1990. Was that the last time we've updated drug and alcohol? Was 1990?
I would assume that since that's in the code, that is true. That was a very long time ago, and things have certainly changed since then.
Well, I'm glad to see we're doing something, because with opioid crisis and some things we've got, I think that'd be definitely something we could continue digging into and seeing what we are requiring or asking our school systems to educate our children on.
Thank you.
At this time, I see no further questions, either online or from the committee. So what is the will of the committee? We have a motion that House Bill 287 do pass. Is there a second? We have a second. So there is a motion and a second before us. The House Bill 287, LC 490368 do pass. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Any opposed, same sign. Hearing none, motion carries. Thank you, Chairman Rich and members of the committee. All right, we will switch gears at this time. Superintendent Woods is with us this morning. I will turn on the podium mic for you there. So members of the committee, we have asked our friends from Department of Education to be here with us today to make a presentation for us. And we do have one more presentation after this. And again, I know that we have members here who need to be in rules, and my understanding is that rules will start promptly on time so that we can start session promptly on time. So Superintendent, we have 15 minutes total allotted for your presentation as well as questions and answers. So hate to be watching a watch, but you know the drill, but the floor is yours, sir. Thanks for being here.
Okay, I think we had a PowerPoint presentation, if I'm not mistaken. So is that correct, Tiffany?
Okay, and I believe that Media Services is going to put that up on the screen for us. Look at that. Modern technology works like a charm. To our friends at Media Services, you do not get the credit that you deserve. So thank you for being here and taking care of us.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. It's a pleasure to be with you today. And like I said, we'll try to move through this fairly quickly to get to the points. Today, we're really looking at where we stand in education today. Some of the major topic will be learning loss. But I think I would say in this map, what you find out, and this is our most recent and current map, what you find out is that throughout Georgia, we've been having school. We've been having school since August. And what you look at is the blue areas on the map, which are the large areas, probably are offering, for the most part, 5 days a week education services with the option to be virtual or in face-to-face. I've had the pleasure to visit probably around 50 schools and districts throughout the state, and that goes from top to bottom, east to west. And our schools are doing a really good job. Of course, some things we have to look at as far as reacting to the virus and some of the quarantining. I think that is really some of the issues that we do, but by and large across the state, you can see that we are continuing to have school and have been very strong. Does that say it has been without issues? No, it does not. But we have had a lot of work, a lot of synergy throughout the state with our teachers and administrators and community members and parents working together. So that gives you a little bit of an overview of where we are in Georgia as far as school openings. But you can see the hybrid would be an A/B, and or a couple of days where half the school would be in and the other half would come in, and of course delayed reopenings and all virtual. We still have a few districts, but most are trying to roll back in. Okay. All right, as we look at addressing learning loss while schools and teachers have done everything possible to continue, we do know that this has not been a normal year since March. Even schools that have been fully in person since August have had to deal with rolling quarantines of teachers, students. Meaning learning has often been interrupted throughout the school year. At the agency level, we continue to focus on addressing the connectivity issues, supporting widespread use of formative diagnostic. And again, a formative basically is a real-time test that we can, or some type of measurement that we can see where our kids are, on a present-day basis. Next, please. At the beginning of the school year, we made Drc Beacon. This is a formative assessment aligned to Georgia milestones, available to every school district at no cost. I think that's very important to mention, but this is aligned to our milestones in grades 3 through 8, English language arts and math. The Beacon can also be used with virtual students. So this is something that's a little bit unique to this. We've trained more than 15,000 teachers on virtual learning and double the capacity of our Georgia virtual school. And our school improvement team is providing direct coaching to our lowest performing schools to help them to address learning loss. Next, please. Also, we have partnered with Georgia Public Broadcasting to create learning resources, and we've made available to the use, we've been able to use their reach and viewership to make families aware of these resources. These can be found at gpb.org/learn, and you'll find lesson plans and supports that could be used for also teachers and parents at this time through various lesson and learning opportunities. Okay. If a third CARES package, we've already had 2 that we've looked at. The first CARES package we used basically to fill in a lot of needed budgetary programs that kind of fell underneath the cuts last year. Currently, with the second CARES, we are looking at providing $1,000 in conjunction with the governor and his support to our education family throughout the state. That's roughly about 284,000 individuals associated with education, from bus drivers to teachers to full support people. And so we hope to be rolling that out pretty soon. But with the third anticipated CARES Act, again, this will be largely the focus will largely be on learning loss and trying to support what goes on and where our needs are throughout the state and our various districts. And of course, that will look a little bit different wherever you are. And as you can see, this really looks at extending the school year, looking at school days, augmented schedules, and also after school programs as well. Okay, next, please. Again, the second part of really this conversation this morning is looking at how districts are using their resources to currently address learning loss. That is not something that has been gone amiss. As I've traveled throughout the state, I want to assure people what I have seen is that people are monitoring where their students are, and that has been something I've seen numerous data walls. And again, the testing, or not the testing, but really the assessment part that they are using across the state has been phenomenal. So it is not something we have been negligent on. But I think this will highlight some of the things that is going on throughout the state. Next, please. Again, as I mentioned before, the Drc Beacon is a formative tool. We are using this roughly in 82 districts right now. To give you just a comparison here, Stevens County, which is one of the smaller districts, uses 40 or has 4,000 students, and teachers have used the Beacon to really spotlight domain-specific information reports and to set goals for their students. Down in Houston County, which enrolls about 30,000, they've been able to use the Beacon to identify, students who need additional support, and the district has used the assessment to find schools with the most students in need and offer strategic assistance. And so this, again, is something I think that the big pull out of this, that is formative. It is available to every single district in the state at no cost. So that's something to help to kind of relieve the financial burden that some of our smaller counties, sometimes have, and even trying to buy something that's off the shelf. Next, please. Okay, looking at this, formative assessments are a key way to, for local school districts can assess learning loss. Other options include take-home books and family involvement programs, small group and peer tutoring, and extended learning time. An example of extended day, an example would be extended day, extended year, and summer learning. Already, again, as early as November or October, I should say, that, I instructed the staff at the DOE that we need to be thinking about, the future of education. What does summer look like? What are programs that we can catch some of our kids who have, missed some of the learning or, had some opportunities passed due to the virus. And so we'll continue to do that as we move forward. Next slide, please. As we look at the chart, again, we surveyed every school district and state charter to ensure we had a clear picture of how they are addressing learning loss. As you can see, the vast majority of districts, 93%, have already administered formative assessments to students at large. So this is not only the Beacon, but as I shared, as I traveled throughout the state, there are other, assessments that schools have bought or purchased or involved in that, provides a formative look. So this is something that's very reassuring to us across the state that our districts are keeping this, at the forefront. Next, please. Moving forward, the large majority of districts plan to continue administering formative assessments on a regular basis to monitor, student progress. Again, the key with the formative assessment, it gives real-time data of where their kids are. Unlike the summative or where the milestones test is typically given at the end of a course, if you're in high school, or probably sometime in April, if you're at middle and elementary school. This, again, the big thing is just it is real-time information for all our folks. And again, the Beacon is something that can be used for students that also are participating virtual learning throughout the districts as well. Next, please. Again, districts also plan to use course grades, teacher input, benchmarks, and credits earned to identify learning loss. One of the things you can really never discard the impact of a teacher. I mean, teachers are there, they're trained. I mean, it's the way that I taught and made assessments. They know their kids better than anyone. And I think relying on their expertise to make clear decisions is something that we definitely need to continue to rely on. I would just, to our district partners, again, that, we don't want to just pass somebody on to pass somebody on. We need to make sure they are ready. And I think using teachers who know their kids and who have been with them throughout this year definitely will continue to be a benefit. Next, please. Most districts plan to use summer schooling and programming to address learning loss. Many also plan to use virtual credit recovery and remediation, along with reworking class schedules and add remediation opportunities during the school day. So I think, and we have one more, I think, just kind of a closing slide. Again, as we look at, expanding this, again, one of the things we look at expanding the opportunities, for our folks to learn, doubling bandwidth to every school, providing, 50,000 students of low income with internet opportunity, approximately 3,000, school bus Wi-Fi rangers. And again, this is portable hotspots, so you can put it in a housing project, an area, and all of a sudden you have, workable internet for a lot of families that are there. As we mentioned, using the CARES Act, we're going to put extenders on our schools and thus extend that range in which internet capacity is out there as well. And, I won't read everything else, but, we are looking to make sure that we are digitally able to provide whatever service is there. And again, that will be beneficial not once the pandemic is over, but further as we continue to educate our kids. And I think
Thank you,
that-
Superintendent. And
Okay.
I certainly want to commend you for the work that you've done and some of the items on this last slide here. Just a question from the chair. If
Sure.
on that next last slide, you mentioned 88% of school districts indicated that they would use some form of summer school program. Can you give us 30 seconds on what that might look like in an average school district and what that means for parents and families?
Well, again, I think as we roll on, of course, some of this is based on what does the pandemic continue to look like. I think we, do have the virtual option, which continues to be in place. It could be traditional summer school in which kids come to school. And I think that what you'll find out is that, you have smaller numbers of kids present, so it's easier to social distance. So if that does become an issue, it is a possibility we look at. Reinforcing, summer school. We do work with other partners, communities and schools. And so it may be a partnership with some of our current providers as well.
Thank you. Courtney, do we have any questions online? Do we have any questions here from members of the committee? What's your microphone number? Or try it now.
Hello.
Yep.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you for the presentation. Easy question, I think. In the slide, it says that the state will be providing, or local districts will be providing, internet access to the homes of low-income communities. The question is, a lot of times a low-income student might be in a charter school or in a magnet program that is in a school not located within their community.
Mhm.
So I just want to be clear that internet access will be based on physical address and not where you attend school.
Yes, ma'am. I mean, as far as looking at, because we looked at, and we've actually been working with some of our, public or private providers, Verizon, AT&T, to expand some things, working with the EMCs and Georgia Power to see how we can, better provide services. So it's not based on a location or a school. It's based on the need of a student. I mean, we're just looking where students are and trying to provide that resource. So if you're in public education, we're doing our best to extend that. Typically what we find out is that this tends to be more of an issue in some of our more rural areas across the state.
Thank you very much. Representative Wilson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Mr. Superintendent, for that presentation. I'm just curious, I hadn't heard about the extenders for the Wi-Fi at the schools. To the extent that you can you tell me a little bit about how far that's extending the Wi-Fi? Is it still just in the immediate range of the schools?
Yes, sir. I mean, as far as would it be able to broadcast, miles and stuff like that? No, but it would provide, easier access that if students are not necessarily in their classroom, they would have access with devices. And we probably stand pretty good as far as devices across the state. That was one thing we saw with the initial funding, that a lot of districts did invest in that and have continued to invest in that. So it is providing, some extension out there, for, some students. It may be that, you're waiting at a bus stop or waiting to be picked up. So it, provides that opportunity as well, especially for high school students. As you think about them in the parking lot and, and maybe they have an extracurricular activity or doing some things after school, but just waiting for, a practice to begin, or, so it provides, some access to content, or at least the internet, that they typically may not have at home. I know in some areas they've also, placed hotspots on buses as well. So students can actually work, I think, on their homework, while they're riding a bus. So we're continuing to try to look at that. I think, we have the Wi-Fi rangers. The hardest problem is for those children that are really isolated out in the country, to say that you can, put something for a child that's 20 miles out. We're going to have to work a little bit harder, but I do appreciate the governor. Some of this, what we talked about, is, the initiative of extending the connectivity throughout the state, which, part is not only educational, but it's looking at a business opportunity or economic development for us as a state.
Thank you. And we are running up against time. So Vice Chairman Irwin is going to close us out with our last question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And Superintendent Woods, thank you for the presentation.
Sure.
And thank you for paying attention to learning loss. I think that attention early to that is going to solve the problem quicker down the road for us, and ask you to continue those efforts. I saw where you're doubling bandwidth. Has there been a survey, or how are you checking to see that schools need that?
Well, I think, talking with our IT, CFO or officer, Dr. Osborne, and again, prior to that, Mr. Bob Swigum, one of the things we knew that we were running out of bandwidth already, and trying to do that. And now you've got to think about, all of a sudden we have a pandemic, which has really, enormously put a strain on some of the load we're looking at. Because we are using more and more technology in the classroom. So that's something that we have known that was coming, but this prevented us, or gave us an opportunity with some of our funding to go ahead and double that. I think for the next, is it 5 or 3 years? 5 years. Okay, we have a 5-year commitment with that. So this was not unexpected, but something we've been talking about at the DOE for a couple of years now, and here we are, and I'm very thankful we were able to provide that for the next 5 years.
And if I may, our CIO meets with the district CIOs monthly. Our chief information officer meets with district CIOs monthly on a check-in to see where they are, what their needs are, as we're trying to address those.
Thank you. Well, thank you, Superintendent, for being here. We appreciate your time and commend you for the work that you're doing, and certainly look forward to having you join us here again soon.
Sure.
So,
okay.
Thank you very
again.
much.
If I could be of service, or we can be of service, please let us know. Thank you.
All right. Ms. Dana Rickman will join us now at the podium, and members of the committee, you should all have this fancy book here in front of you. And to our committee members who are joining us online, if you do not have a copy of this in your office, please contact my office and we'll make sure that you have a copy. So we are right on time. So again, 15 minutes, leave some time for Q&A, but the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I think there's a slide that we handed over earlier just to help walk everybody through. But good morning, and thank you to the chair and to the committee for allowing me some time to talk to you. I am Dana Rickman with the Georgia Partnership for Excellence in Education. For those of you that are new to the Education Committee and may not be familiar with our work, the Georgia Partnership is a nonprofit, nonpartisan research think tank. We tend to be affiliated with the Georgia Chamber of Commerce, so we are independent from them. And we were created back in 1992, actually, by a request from the business community, because at that time it was felt that the public education system was not producing a high enough quality workforce from which for them to recruit employees. But they did not know how to engage in the education process to help strengthen that. So we were created to be that voice, to try and figure out how to make the birth to work pipeline a much stronger workforce pipeline. I always tell that story before I read presentation so people understand that while there are many, many reasons for a strong public education system, the partnership tends to come at it through the lens of strong workforce and economic development. So I just wanted to lay that out there. The document the publication that you have was also been passed out amongst the chamber. Thank you to Representative Nix who helped us do that. It's an annual publication, the top 10 issues to watch, that we develop every year in consultation with many, many other advocates, government officials, researchers, policy wonks like myself about the big issues that are facing Georgia. And we try to break it down in pretty straightforward language for non-educators to follow. And it really lays out why is the issue important, what's happening in Georgia, and then recommendations moving forward. And so very briefly, you see the list there. I'm not going to go into detail on all 10, but briefly, I want to say that as Georgia moves from response to recovery and ultimately success, through this time, I think it's important to take a step back and consider longer term implications and how to create a better system for all individuals. Last year's top 10 issues to watch really focused on a pending educational and economic development crisis that have been highlighted by the Southern Regional Education Board, SREB. At that time, pre-pandemic, SREB concluded that due to the impact of automation in our changing economy, coupled with the current educational level of Georgia's state population, we were in danger of seeing 1.5 million of our workers and their children be unemployed or underemployed by 2030. So that was the crisis we were facing last year at this time. Since then, obviously, COVID, economic shutdowns,
really have accelerated these economic trends. And the pandemic has accelerated the workforce demand crisis. And recently, SREB published updated estimates about the looming crisis, and they estimate now that 2 million Georgia workers, about 45% of our population, of our workforce, are at risk now for unemployment, reduced working hours by 2025. So the pandemic has really exacerbated the problems that we were facing a year ago. And I think everybody agrees, or at least I hope they now see, that I think our education system is our key to economic recovery in Georgia and across the United States. But the pandemic has provided an opportunity to truly implement some innovative educational reforms, some structural long-term changes, that all of the great work that DOE that you just heard about, the Herculean effort that our schools are going through right now to just get us back to air quote normal, all of those are focused on recovery and response. What we're talking about here is long-term success for the state. And so each of these 10 issues really lay out opportunities for long-term, really hard but structural changes that need to be made so that we're not facing that 2025, 2030 crisis in the future. And so very briefly, I just want to touch on a couple of them. And if there's time, I'm happy to answer questions on any of them or anything else education related. The first issue, equity, the imperative for recovery, for success. Of utmost importance moving forward to support this long-term recovery is the ability to successfully address the needs of students and families. And as we know, the pandemic and subsequent economic turmoil has exposed many of the systematic structural barriers that have historically been there, preventing a lot of Georgians from fully participating and taking advantage of our educational system and our economic development. The impacts of people of color and those with lower levels of education that we've been seeing now are not an accident. Generations of national and state public policy decisions have institutionalized this sort of structural racism for decades. The path from recovery to success must consider new normals that revolutionizes this role of education, how instruction is delivered, and the role of the entire educational system plays in the economic recovery in our development. And so that issue just sort of lays the foundation for the subsequent 9. Very briefly on funding, a lot of debates around funding, and there's a lot of detail in the book, but I think as we move forward and we're putting money back into the educational system, we need to figure out how to prioritize funding for those that have been hardest hit by the pandemic and those that have been historically underfunded by our system. Early learning. Lots in the early learning issue. I think those of us with children, what we already knew and what everybody else recognizes is that the early learning industry, not just pre-K, but 0 to 3 in the after school population, these are essential workers. This is an essential industry for our state. And we need to figure out how to properly fund and support these workers moving forward. Delivery of instruction. The pandemic has provided new opportunities to really rethink and really boldly innovate about how we deliver instruction. Think about where students are learning, how they best receive instruction. And so there's a lot of recommendations there. Number 5, teachers, professionalism, pay, and preparation. We've already heard a bill this morning to really recognize and how to recruit more teachers into the field. The governor has announced a teacher package, which are a step in the right direction to address teachers. We have a lot of recommendations in issue 5. 6, accountability and assessments. I know it's not one of the sexier topics that people like to talk about, but accountability and assessments are incredibly important. We've heard a little bit this morning already from DOE about what they're doing in terms of formative assessments, but we need to think about short, long-term plans about how we know our students are learning. How do we know that these different instructional models that we're trying out right now are actually working and with which populations? Parent engagement, I think all parents can attest that we've been engaged in the education of our children and much differently and much more intimately. And so how do we capitalize on that and really think about new ways to keep parents engaged in the educational process? Post-secondary completion, we have a series of recommendations of how to increase post-secondary access and completion for all of Georgians. And when we talk about post-secondary completion, we mean certificates, associate's degrees, 4-year degrees, things beyond education. Related to that, Georgia's workforce pipeline. We need to think about Educators, legislators, employers, how do we align academics and work-based learning experiences with in-demand jobs and focusing on the long-term reskilling and upskilling that our economy demands? We do a lot of great work in our CTAE programs and our dual enrollment programs. How do we even align those better, have better articulation agreements, strengthen those curricula? Finally, I want to spend a moment on issue 10, reinventing education in Georgia. Reinventing education has become sort of a catchphrase now that everybody is talking about, saying we need to and I've said it many times just in the few minutes that I've been up here. As Georgia's moving into 2021, an essential question remains: how does the state move from response and recovery to long-term success? There's tremendous pressure for schools to open for in-person learning in the fall of 2020, with the recognition that schools are the foundation that needs to be in place for the economy and for the rest of us to really get back to work and to function. The recovery of schools, however, really required support of not just the school system, but support from the private sector, the nonprofit sector, the faith sector, the advocacy efforts, community efforts. It depended on leaders from across agencies and entities on the state and local level to really coordinate. So there was a lot of moving parts. So the question is, for me, thinking about how do we coordinate all of these moving parts, but honor the fact that we are a local control state? And how do we keep that is precious to us? There was a lot of guidance that has been provided to schools and districts related to keeping students healthy, keeping them safe, recommendations around social distancing, cleaning and hygiene, communications, water and ventilation systems. All of these communications to districts were focused how to educate safely, not focused on how to educate equitably, right? Those are different questions. To move from recovery to long-term success, schools are being asked to rethink and reinvent. This is a really heavy lift for individual districts. They're not only struggling with how to safely educate their students and keep their staff and educators safe. The shutdown and economic crisis exposed and exacerbated the opportunity gaps that already existed in our economic and educational systems. One of the most critical we've already talked about was the uneven access to virtual devices and the internet, both of which we need to move the state forward. When we talk about reinventing education, we talk about how teachers are educated, what constitutes a robust professional development model, addressing statewide bandwidth access, strengthening alignments between early learning, K-12, post-secondary, local, regional, and state workforce pathways, whole system redesigns. These broad policy plans and a commensurate funding strategy to support them is really beyond an individual districts to do. This is state level policy work that we need to figure out how to come together and have a strong policy framework so that local control decisions can really thrive. Decisions around what's the best summer school? How do we do extended learning? What's our best curriculum? How do I want to hire and train teachers? So there's a real difference in what we're talking about. SREB has recommended a couple of sort of intentional alignment strategies that states can follow. And thinking about aligning our career and technical education for 21st century, our Perkins 5 plan, with our Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act, our WIOA plan, and align that with ESSA. So if you bring together your educational plan with your economic development plan, you're coordinating long-term economic opportunities for all Georgians. Really believe that local control can flourish around a lot of these issues. However, to truly empower local leaders to make decisions that best support students, long-term prosperity, a strong state policy framework centered on these systems level issues, along with adequate and equitable resources and coordinated leadership, needs to be in place to move us forward as a state, thinking long-term. That's my summary. And
Very well done.
You all have the book. It's 80 pages. It's a page turner. Let me tell you, it's real. But also, if you go to our website, gpee.org, there are one-page summaries of each of the 10, if there's a particular one. And if there's time, I'm happy to entertain questions, or I'm always available if you guys would like to reach out and have additional questions.
Well, thank you very much for being here and for your presentation. Ms. Courtney, are there any questions online? Seeing none. Press the button. Can't tell which number it is. 13. Oh, there it is. Go ahead.
Thank you, Chairman, and also Vice Chair Irwin. The funny thing about this is I really am into education. I'm a parent, and I thought I did not want to be on the education committee, I had some other choices, but the Lord puts you where you're supposed to be. And your presentation is spot on. It's excellent. My doctorate work is actually in diversity and inclusion. And the collaboration that you're speaking of, business and school, like how do you combine these things and make them actually work? So briefly, I think this is really a template for Georgia, what she has provided to us based on the research that I've done. And the only thing that I would say that's not on there that is really important, because you consider yourself a partner to the chamber, is in economy. Research shows that if there's a diverse workforce,
Yes.
that you also have a greater profit margin in the private sector. So
Yes.
if you include, the diversity piece in the corporate sector or private sector, wherever you are, that's why it's so important that you do have equity in education, because it helps in the long term. So I appreciate this, and I'll definitely talk to you afterwards.
Yeah, please do. And on that point, another program that the Georgia Partnership runs is called the Economics of Education. And it is all about that. The more diverse your workforce is, the stronger your workforce is, the stronger your profit margin. And so it really looks at how education is a tool for economic development and gets into all of those issues and breaks out by region of the state and things of that nature. So I'm happy to talk about that if you have further questions.
Thank you very much. And once again, closing us out, Vice Chairman Irwin.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Let me commend y'all. Every year for 17 years, I've read and I've turned the pages of this. Tremendous information in here. I also want to point out number 3 on your list, that early learning.
Yes.
And I appreciate the fact that you pointed out the importance of those workers and the difference that we can make in this state long range if we continue to focus on number 3, that early learning. Many school people understand very quickly that how that student gets to us what they know at that time when they start kindergarten has a tremendous impact on how far and how quickly as a school you can carry them. So all of this is important, but especially thank you for pointing that out.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I certainly appreciate your time and you being here. Thank you to our committee members online. And at this time, we will stand adjourned.
Thank you so much.